want to talk about the repeal amendment briefly, but I also want to talk about some other things that were just brought up. It's really, really important that the grassroots get mobilized on this constitutional amendment. And John's exactly right. People will have a tendency to switch their votes when it comes up for the second reading after the election. And so I think that shows you how important elections are. Elections do have consequences, and it's a good opportunity to perhaps change the tone of the Senate and which direction they are going. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you just for a moment about this thing that we're calling the repeal amendment. Jamie Radke could probably do a better job of talking about it than I. She's been involved with it longer than I have, I think. Her organization, or not her organization with whom she works, is really, the Tea Party group is really very supportive of this idea. And as John pointed out, we've gotten some increasing national attention on both sides of the issue. Randy Barnett and I were on the Judge Napolitano show, and that guy's a talker. He will not let you, his questions keep going, and you're ready to answer, and he keeps going. But he's very supportive. They asked, I think, Jamie, they probably asked you, they asked me if I wanted to do Chris Matthews and Hardball about this past week. I said, no thanks, I'm busy. And they got a great guy to do it, Ken Cuccinelli, and Ken did not give an inch, and really did a good job making Matthews appear to be what the buffoon that he is. The repeal amendment is very simple. It's an amendment to the United States Constitution, a proposed amendment to the United States Constitution that would simply say that if 2/3 of the states agreed in a resolution, they could repeal any existing federal law or regulation. It's very simple in language. There's no chance of going to court on it that you have with other proposed constitutional amendments. It's transparent, and in my mind, it's sorely needed. It's over the past 100 years, and I know I'm probably preaching to the choir in this room, but over the past 100 years, the rights of the states have just been sucked up by the federal government to the point today we're really wondering what rights we have left. The repeal amendment would simply act as a veto, a potential veto. If 2/3 of the states agreed on something that were so egregious that they all agreed on something, and that in itself is going to be a huge challenge. But if you got 2/3 of the states to agree that something that Congress had done was so silly or expensive or dangerous or whatever, they, acting together, could repeal that. Now, Congress could go right back in and pass that same legislation. I think they'd probably be pretty foolish to do that, but they've done some foolish stuff in their time. I got in big trouble with the Richmond paper. They gave me the liar, liar, pants on fire for an example, a hypothetical example that I used about something that was working in Congress. There has been testimony in Congress about the idea of taking your individual IRA accounts and 401k accounts and rolling them into Social Security to give it more substance and more strength. That's something that has been discussed in Congress. And so in an article that Randy wrote and I signed my name to, we talked about here's the potential of something that could happen. If Congress passed something like this, this would probably be something that 2/3 of the states would agree needs to be repealed. But you know, there are literally hundreds of examples that you could use of things that Congress has done. Just the other day, somebody called to my attention that the Federal Highway Administration has a proposed new regulation that would unify every street sign in the country. Every street sign, Main Street, Elm Street, whatever, would have to be the same size. The initial letter could be capital, but all the others had to be lowercase. The city of Milwaukee said to comply, that would cost us $2 million to put in new street signs. Now, one, where does a bureaucrat at the Federal Highway Administration get the authority to do something like that? And two, what business is it of the federal government's what Milwaukee or Richmond or whatever, how they want to design their street signs? That's just an example of what's going on in Washington. That's just an example why something like the repeal amendment is desperately needed. The process, as probably everybody in this room knows, there are two ways you can amend the United States Constitution. One is by a resolution that is passed by 2/3 of the members of both bodies of Congress and then is ratified by 3/4 of the states, 38 states. That's the way every amendment to the Constitution has been proposed and accepted to date. But the framers, in their wisdom, and it's a wonderful document, and the framers said, you know, what if Congress doesn't act? We ought to give the states some alternative way of proposing a constitutional amendment, and they did. Article 5 of the Constitution says if 2/3 of the states petition Congress through resolution to call an amendment convention, then Congress has to call that convention. Anything that comes out of that amendment convention has to be ratified by 3/4 of the states, 38 of the states. So again, the likelihood of getting 2/3 of the states to agree to call a convention is going to be a struggle. That's an uphill battle. And then what comes out of it, and the Virginia resolution says that the only purpose of this resolution is to enact the repeal amendment, nothing else. And if any members of that amendment convention tried to introduce something else, they would lose their ability to be a representative to that convention. We've been able so far to talk to a lot of other states, try and get their interest. The Speaker of the House in Utah, in Texas, in Indiana, in South Carolina have all indicated that they want to support this and make it a high priority this coming session. The President of the Senate in Florida, several other legislative leaders, the Majority Leader of the Senate in North Dakota is interested in doing it. We've talked to a lot of states, and we have a lot of interest. Virginia's not going to be a slam dunk. I'm pretty confident we can get it through the House, but the Senate, once again, is going to be the struggle on passing this resolution. And once again, that's where grassroots efforts come in. That's where we have to go talk to those people that might be on the fence, that are facing a tough election. The only good thing about working with the Senate this year on this resolution is we don't have to come back after the election and do it a second time. If we pass this resolution one time, that's all we need. And so anything that this group can do to stir up the interest, particularly on the Senate side. We think it's going to go to the Rules Committee, but we're not sure. You never know with that group where something's going to go. But we will know shortly, and I'm sure that we'll try and get everybody to call on members of the Senate, both Republican and Democrat. We're not taking the Republicans for granted over there either. It's really, I think, really important. This is a statement. This is more of a statement of the states are kind of standing up and saying, you know, we've had enough. And the likelihood that it would be used if it were in place would probably be pretty rare, because one advantage of this bill is the congressmen and women will be looking over their shoulders a little bit. Just like they have to anticipate a presidential veto, they would have to anticipate a state's veto were they to go too far. So I think more, as much as anything else, it just sort of sets a marker out. And I think that's very helpful. This is a very important piece of legislation. Jamie and some of the others and I were trying to find some people that could help us with public relations on how you roll this thing out nationwide. And I called a friend of mine in Washington who has been very involved in a lot of these kind of projects over the years. And I described the amendment to him, and he said, well, now, Bill, you got to be prepared. When you roll this thing out, you're going to get carpet bombed. The media, the liberal press is going to challenge you on it, and they're going to carpet bomb you. We had a press conference in Washington, I guess 2 weeks ago, and daggone it, the bombs didn't start coming the next day. The Washington Post had a hate piece on it. The Norfolk paper had a piece on it. Even a little paper over in the Valley had a piece talking about. They talk about it's we're trying to revoke the Civil Rights Act of 1964, or whatever, doing things like that. They always bring up the race card, and that's what we're going to see. But anyway, appreciate your help. Trying to answer any questions you might have, John, if I have a minute.
Let me ask the first question. What do you think will be the justification senators have in Virginia for limiting their own prerogatives?
It beats me. I don't know, John. I tell them this is not a Republican or a Democrat thing, a liberal or a conservative thing. This is restoring a small bit of the power that the state legislatures were intended to have through the Constitution that's been taken away over the last 100 years. So if I'm a liberal Democrat and I'm worried about a conservative Republican Congress or conservative Republican administration, I'd like to have something like this. John, I think they're going to fall back. I mean, they're going to say, you're just what the liberal commentators are saying in the Washington Post. You're trying to roll back times back to pre-civil. They compare this to nullification and John C. Calhoun. And in fact, Chris Matthews asked General Cuccinelli that very question, and Cuccinelli, you know, shot right back and said, "This is absolutely not nullification." But yeah.
First of all, thank you for taking the time to come here and explain this to us. I have a little question about the way you described this. Would the repeal amendment deal with just legislative enactments, or say enactments of the EPA? Or
No, regulation or law.
It would be both regulation as
Yeah.
well as legislative enactment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Steve Robson.
Mr. Speaker, questions about two timelines. What is the timeline to hit the amendment all the way through the required states and have the convention, or is there one? And then the second thing is, if it is enacted, what would be the timeline to repeal some bad law? Would it have to be within a year of the law's passage, or the regulations adoption?
Two good questions, and they're both. The second one's easy. Would there be a timeline? No. The way that we're proposing this resolution, we say any law. Now, we've debated this back and forth, and some people have suggested we ought to go back 5 years or go back 10 years, because you are laying yourself open to people saying you want to get rid of the Civil Rights Act back in, what was it, 64 or 65. But in the resolution that we're proposing, and we're asking the other states to have similar proposals, we don't put a timeline in there. As far as the timeline of how long this takes, one of the real concerns right now is how long a proposed call for a constitutional amendment is valid. You know, there's a lot floating out there. We would look just at this resolution. I would hope that we could get it moving along pretty quickly. I think we've got a fairly brief window of opportunity in this country right now, where people are so concerned about the direction of the country and what's happening. And I would. And the other thing I didn't mention that's happened in the past, and we anticipate may well happen again this time. Congress doesn't want an amendment convention. With the 17th Amendment to the Constitution, which in hindsight was a very bad one. That's the one that gave direct election to the senators, to the people. It took it away from the legislature. When you get 15 or 20 or 25 or 30 states that have come up with a similar resolution, Congress will act. They did that with the 17th Amendment. They did that, I think, with women's right to vote. That was only a couple of states. They with the balanced budget amendment, that almost got enough votes to pass, and Congress then acted with a hollow Graham-Rudman Act, which really is meaningless. But Congress will act, and what we're hoping is, if you talk again about the timeline, if we could get 10 or 15 states or 20 states to pass something this coming legislative year, and we've got a Congress now, a House that's going to be more sympathetic. Eric Cantor is supportive of this bill. There's a fellow from Rob Bishop from Utah that's introduced a companion resolution in Congress, in the House, and so there's Bob Goodlatte's very interested in it. There are people in Virginia and outside of Virginia in Congress that are interested in doing it. So hopefully, if we could get a show of support where we could show 10 or 15 or 20, 25 states that pass this resolution in the next year or two, then we could move it right along. But again, it's very important that Virginia pass this resolution, and it's very important that we work the Senate hard.
Rick.
Yeah. Does the resolution as written include an explanation for how a convention will be constituted and how delegates would be selected?
No.
Is there any precedent for that?
No.
So anybody could attend?
Not necessarily. Anybody could attend that's selected by the legislature, I would suppose, or if Congress wanted to step in and name those people. That could be a tussle. Again, that's why I hope, and Congress doesn't want to go. This is all uncharted ground. Every amendment that we've had so far has been done by the first approach, where Congress has proposed it and the states have ratified it. And I really suspect if we get a core nucleus of states that are going in this direction, Congress will step in.
I was just saying, I don't know. I mean, unless I haven't seen the last resolution, the most recent one I saw, it did have a component in there that said that the state legislatures would choose their delegates. I don't know if that's still in there.
We've changed things so many times, Jamie, I can't remember.
Last question.
Would this be something that has to be passed by the state legislature, or could there be a state referendum in some cases?
We don't allow for state referendum in Virginia. This would have to be something that would be passed by the state legislatures around the country.
Speaker, thank you for
being
here.
Thanks for having
so
me.
much.